Welcome back to Real Florida Magazine.
Welcome back. We've got an old friend of the show here today, Judge Chris Patterson from right here in Washington and Holmes County. He's with us. We're going to talk a little bit about the brand new Washington County Courthouse, $9.2 million, the only courthouse that's been funded by the state in recent memory. So we're going to talk a little bit about that new courthouse. We're going to talk about Law Day 2015 coming up the 1st of May, and maybe just enjoy a little bit of conversation about the old days, Panama City Beach, the changes that we've seen as two older guys generally do when they get together. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back. As mentioned, our guest today is Chris Patterson, Judge Patterson. Thanks for taking the time today. I know that you're extremely busy. You just finished up one trial. I know that with the courthouse and all going on, that's keeping you busy. But I appreciate you carving out the time today.
Happy to be here, Paul. Got some news we want to share about what's happening in the legal community. But always a pleasure to be with you, and certainly nice to be in the air conditioning today. Usually you catch me where I'm just absolutely drenched down at the Possum Festival or elsewhere, but happy to be with you and happy to share.
Well, again, we appreciate it, and we get a lot of good response from our viewership. When you're on, we have an opportunity, as we do with several of our other guests, to talk about things outside the norm, outside of just the chit-chat, and actually get some real hard facts about things going on in the area. So we always like to have you come on. Let's start at the beginning. For those who may not be familiar with you, you are a circuit judge in the 14th Judicial Circuit. You cover Washington and Holmes County. Talk a little bit about your history as a judge, how you came into this position, and maybe a little bit about your background and a little bit about you as a judge.
All right. I was elected in 2010. Judge Sermons, the longtime circuit judge and chief judge, had stepped down, and I was elected to fill his seat. I have served, again, in the Washington and Holmes County divisions, but we also do cases over in Jackson County, down in Bay County, and Calhoun. So basically a circuit judge, and historically has been a judge that rides the circuit. And if you can envision the wild, wild west, and the judge would get on the back of his horse and go traveling from courthouse to courthouse, that's literally what I do. And what is envisioned by a circuit judge. The county judges, of course, Judge Peel here in Washington County and Judge Powell in Holmes County, they stay put. And so by and large, it's the circuit judges that move. So we handle all the felony cases. We do the family law. We'll do any of the child issue cases, the serious contractor business law cases. So we run a gamut. But yes, we stay very busy, but always happy to be here. Up in Washington and Holmes County to serve, and thoroughly enjoy it being up here.
You mentioned that Colby Peel and other judges stay put as county judges. Not so much the case these days, because obviously we have a very interesting situation in Washington County with the condemnation of the current courthouse, subsequent funding for the new one, which is in itself a story, and we'll touch on that, and obviously the prospect of a brand new courthouse sometime in the next few years right here in Chipley. You and I, we really like to, when we get together, talk a little bit about what happened with that progression of the courthouse falling into disrepair. More importantly, the funding and the way that it happened. And you point out that the Washington County Courthouse is literally the only courthouse that has been funded by the state in recent memory. Talk a little bit about how we find ourselves in this situation with the courthouse to start with.
We start the process with water that began to pool in the basement of the old courthouse. We would see that around where the new elevator shaft, not so new now, of course, had been built, and the water would continue to pool, and then further examination would show that the water was beginning to collect in the evidence room, where years and years of cases and the evidence of value was stored, in the old document rooms, and then we did further detection, found black mold, all sorts of mold, arsenic, all sorts of lead issues. And we really got to a point where you better stop scratching because we know it's bad. It's very bad. Let's go see if we can get some help. That all takes place in December of 2012, going into then the summer of 2013. And finally, in December of 2013, by order of the Chief Judge, we condemned the courthouse because it was no longer safe. And at that point, we had no place to go. It had never happened in the 14th Circuit where it had been a disaster that had been declared to where there was just nowhere for the court to hold court. And that's how we found ourselves out on the street literally at about December 19th of that year, looking for a place to try cases and to hold court. And so that's how it got us out of the courthouse and then into the situation where you and I then got back together and said, what can we do to see if we can get some help for Washington County?
You say that you found yourself on the street. You have told me and assemblages of people in my presence about the truly frightening situation of having to hide in a broom closet or stay in your car as they let in prisoners and family of defendants for fear, literally, for your safety. Talk a little bit about that element and how that affected you when the courthouse was closed down.
Well, the judges in general, and it's not just me, but the judges in general are faced with some challenges because we now, for the most serious of cases, the felony cases, if you will, we try those in the courtroom annex building, which is attached to the sheriff's office. It's a standalone building. It was originally designed to be the old county commission room, and so we've repurposed that. Unfortunately, the building does not have any holding cells, does not have any place to securely put inmates who are being brought over from the jail or from the prison system for their cases to be heard. And judges find themselves in very odd situations of having to duck into bathrooms or broom closets, bailiffs having to direct the judges to stay out in their cars while inmates are being brought in and out. It is the reality that we're faced with, and frankly, that's one of the reasons why I think the Florida Supreme Court helped us with the legislature to get us funding because the security issues were so serious and continue to be serious, but we're getting better every day. But I think that's one of the reasons why we were identified as needing immediate help.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the intro, this is the only time, again, in any of our collective recent memories, that the state has funded the construction of a new courthouse. And as you point out, that probably adds that exacerbating circumstance to the mix. Talk a little bit about, we found ourselves in the situation where we were literally in the condemned building, so we're out of that completely. You're making do in areas that don't have adequate security, and through nobody's fault, they're being used for purposes outside of the norm. Not even any metal detectors, and on, not adequate parking. And when you have a controversial adversarial type of a legal proceeding, especially a murder trial or something like that, my goodness, all bets are off. Talk a little bit about the process that collectively the county went through, and luckily with the help of Harold Basil, retired clerk of court from Bay County, who at the time was interim clerk here. Talk a little bit about how that whole process worked.
We established a coalition. The county commissioners were very, very instrumental in this. County manager David Corbin, of course, the county attorney Jeff Goodman. We've got all the judges involved in the 14th Circuit, the court administration folks. We engaged Sheriff Haddock. We needed to make sure that everybody was on the same page to try to figure out where we could hold court. The existence of a courthouse in a county seat is strictly the obligation of a county. And in recent memory, and certainly in the Republican administrations in the gubernatorial offices over in Tallahassee, it is not likely that county obligations are going to be paid by the state of Florida, especially buildings that belong to the county. And that's where we found ourselves because, of course, Washington County in dire straits financially. we needed some immediate help, and we had nowhere else to turn. And so come January of 2014, when we began the process, everything was on the table. All options were on the table. And we were fortunate, sadly, with the illness of Linda Cook, the former clerk of court, we had appointed Harold Basil, who had a wealth of experience, not only locally in the 14th Circuit, but also in Tallahassee, and his political connections became invaluable as we began to talk to those legislators that could help us and find a way out of our problem.
We were fortunate enough to be called in early in that process by representatives of the 14th Judicial Circuit. We attended some of the meetings. Had the fortune, dubious though it may be, of taking a couple of guided tours of the courthouse from the basement all the way up to the attic. Documented much of that in photos and video. Had some news media come in during that time, local newspaper and so forth, and television stations. But at the end of the day, their charge is to report the news, and they're not necessarily in the documentary business. We were fortunate to be right here, invested in Washington County, with our relationship and our relationship with Harold and obviously the County Commission. It was sort of a perfect situation because we were at the right place at the right time, not just for ourselves, because frankly we enjoyed a little bit of goodwill because of that effort, but on behalf of the 14th Judicial Circuit, we were actually able to stick it right between the eyes of the people in Tallahassee that this was not a fun situation. It was not a situation to be taken lightly. And just showing the mold and the mildew on the records, and just showing the lead paint peeling and that sort of thing. We met with multiple agencies, and you took the lead on that. We had other politicians come over. Talk a little bit about how that process worked.
We were looking for any way possible to get attention to the problem. And this was not a normal problem, it was an emergency problem. And one of the issues, just in passing, you and I had discussed, why don't we put together some sort of video that we can take to the legislature, let them actually see. I'm a visual learner, I think a lot of people are, and let them see what we're talking about. Because on paper, it does not capture the dramatic change of what's happened here in Washington County. So we did so. And with that video then, we were able, once that was produced, and you folks were so gracious in helping us out with that, we took that to Senator Gates, Representative Petronis. We took that to the Supreme Court. We took that basically to anybody that would listen to us in Tallahassee through the court administration channels and likewise to educate them about the real problem. With the video in hand, we were able then to invite those dignitaries to come over. Take a look at the courthouse yourself. We will tour and give tours to anyone who wishes to come so that you can see what's happening. And from Senator Nelson's office all the way down to local officials in adjoining counties, everybody came. We had U.S. Representative Steve Sutherland at the time. He toured with us. We had local agencies, local public or civic groups that wanted to see it. We open the doors to anybody with a caveat, of course, that you better wear a mask and we want you to glove up and we don't want you to stay in there too long. This isn't a healthy place, but we were trying to do anything we could to share what was happening in the courthouse because the vast majority of folks don't want to have to go to a courthouse. There are things there that may not be nice or may not be what they enjoy doing. So they really weren't aware in the area and certainly in the region of what had happened to our courthouse. So it was a multi-pronged approach, but the video approach and the viral approach, putting it online, was, I point to that as one of the best success stories we had.
Well, I know we had representatives from Governor Scott's office came ultimately as well. Bottom line is that money's always tight, and it's not getting any better. It's never going to get any better. We're not in Kansas anymore. We're never going to see the good old days, I fear, that we saw in the 70s and the 80s. It's going to keep getting tighter, which is probably a good thing because there was a lot of waste and pork. But regardless, at the end of the day, there's only so much money to go around, and I think the county asked for $8 million or thereabouts, and ended up actually with 9.2. Is that accurate?
We had contingency plans to try to build for somewhere around 6.2 million. And as the process went on, we were asked to give justifications to the legislature as to if that was a realistic number or if we needed more money. And ultimately, the legislature, in their wisdom, awarded $9.2 million. Again, the only county in the state of Florida that received any courthouse funding last year. It was the only county, based upon a coalition of all the county governments in the state of Florida, that asked for courthouse money. So again, we had folks, Chairman Alan Bush and others, that were working different prongs of the problem to get people to kind of make way for us, let our project come into the forefront and be the true emergency without overselling it. And it was a true emergency and still is, to get the funding that we needed. And I will tell you, I'm probably one of the few people that stayed up on that Friday night as the legislative session was closing, watching Jimmy Petronas in his white suit as they were approving that budget, and the $9.2 million came through. We have much thanks for Senator Gates, Representative Petronas, the entire legislative team, and Governor Scott for all of their input and getting us where we are today. And now the hard part starts. We build a new courthouse.